Hello and welcome. I'm Rachel Bleemer, Director of Events for Film Independent. Welcome to Film Independent Presents Virtual Edition. Before we get started with today's very exciting Q&A, I have to give some praise to our loyal supporters. Thank you to the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, and thank you to our screening partner, Vision Media. For those of you watching live today, please use the button on the bottom of your screen to ask our guests some questions at the end. With that, I am so honored today to introduce our guest moderator. Please welcome IndieWire's Deputy Editor, Kate Erbland. Kate, please take it from here.
Hello. Thank you everyone who is here joining us. I'm so excited to talk to these filmmakers about this incredible film, I Care a Lot, which came out on Netflix this past weekend. And I know everyone's been talking about it. We're gonna talk for a little bit, about half an hour, and then I'm gonna take some questions from the audience. So if you wanna pop them into the little Zoom Q&A, hopefully I can get to them. So without further ado, we have writer and director J Blakeson, star Rosamund Pike, and composer Marc Canham. Just to start, I think the thing that everyone is really loving about this film is it's hard to figure out what's going to happen next. And I mean that as a huge compliment. We don't see that oftentimes. So for each of you, do you have a favorite part of the film where you're like, ah, yes, this encapsulates what this film is about? And Jay, we could start with you and kind of go around.
Oh man, that's really hard because like when you're making a film, that sort of changes constantly because you sort of like, as you're writing it, you get kind of like this favorite bit, and then when you're shooting it, there's another favorite bit. But I think the scene that sort of gets me every time, that I don't think I'll ever get sick of watching, is the scene between Rosamund and Chris Messina when the lawyer, Dean Erickson, walks into her office and they have that sort of face-off, a sort of battle of wills and poker game, because it's just, you know, it's just so watchable. There's just two actors at the top of their game going for it, and it was a joy to film. I enjoyed writing it. It was a joy to watch it being shot, and it was a joy to edit. So front to back, that's probably my favorite.
Rosamund, what was your favorite?
You know, I might be boring. I might say the same scene because, well, two if I can. That scene with Chris Messina, because it was very early on in our shoot, and I think it was a day that I thought, okay, you know, I had Marla in my mind, and there's a sort of thing that happens when you have her in your sort of body and she's kind of just coming out of you, you know, independently, you know, without you creating it. And that was the day when that happened. All I really had to do was react, be Marla and react to Chris and have fun and try and stage manage him, play chess with him, work out what his game was, feel how I could still get the upper hand. And it was just like playing. And also Jay and Doug Emmett, our cinematographer, they were kind of like kids who had like got their best scene to shoot, and they were just having fun. Everyone was having fun because the dialogue was so good. The sort of, I mean, the chemistry, people talk about the chemistry between Chris and I, but the chemistry between Jay and Doug was great too. And when you see a director and cinematographer having fun and creating together, it's great. But then my other favorite sequence is actually wordless, and I think it's all the sequence through the car crash and into the convenience store, because I personally love that Jay was bold enough to write this sequence for this character who's all about her wit, her words, her, you know, what she can do with words as weapons, reduced to nothing but her kind of grit. And you see her, you know, you see her become the prey, but you also see her kind of bedraggled and like fighting with her physicality rather than her words. So those are my two.
Marc, what about you?
I think the most important one for me, sitting with Jay chatting about how we were going to shape the score, was probably the moment when Roman calls the hit. And because at that point in the score, because obviously I'm really focused on how we shape that, the score has a kind of brittle, satirical take on the American dream. I mean, people have pointed out how it's got this sort of shiny electronic texture to it up until that point. And the whole idea was, from that point onwards, is to start stripping away that veneer of the sparkliness, the shininess, the bits that people really love about the first act, and start getting into the darker world of the head-to-head between Marla and Roman. So I think for me, strategically, that was the key moment, where the score had to shift. But I agree with the Rosamund and Jay that the scene with Chris is just priceless. It's so sharp.
So Jay, this is a different kind of film for you. I think when I hear your name, I usually think of Alice Creed, so like horror, thrillers, sci-fi stuff. Can you tell us about where this idea came from, how long you've been sort of nurturing it, and what your writing process was?
Well, it's kind of hard to say where ideas come from, because unluckily they don't sort of come like eureka moments. They sort of slowly sort of fester. And this one, so the genesis of this one was reading kind of real life stories. I mean, I'd heard of like this sort of loophole, this sort of scam, and like most people who come out of the film think that can't be right. That doesn't make sense. And then you look into it, and you see just how prevalent it is, and like thousands of people get kind of preyed upon by these guardians every year. And so it sort of just terrified me, and that sort of stuck with me, that idea that somebody could just come and steal you, because it just almost felt like they were gangsters doing heists. They were coming and stealing all people, you know. And that idea, to me, immediately I kind of thought of like, well, heist movie where you steal an old person is quite interesting, but also like the idea of this horrible sort of situation just didn't sort of leave me. But I didn't really want to do it in a very sort of issues-based, earnest sort of like expose way. I mean, I think, you know, it absolutely could lend itself to that, to like a really sort of horrifying, shocking film where you just sort of see it from the victim's point of view. And that wouldn't, to be honest, the first instinct is to do it like that, because you're so horrified, because you're reading the victim's story and you're so sort of touched by them. But it felt to me that it was almost like so bright and so hot in its horror that it would be hard to sort of just look directly at it or pick it up and hold it, that you'd have to take a different approach for it to actually sort of sink into people. And so I wanted to do it, you know, much like my heroes, kind of Billy Wilder or Stanley Kubrick, who, like, you know, something like Dr. Strangelove, which obviously takes the end of the world and sort of has some fun with it and makes it an entertaining movie with like a very, very dark satirical take on it, and all these characters who are sort of venal and vain and horrible and selfish and guttural, and, you know, and I really enjoy sort of like seeing that, because that seems very true to life, that we're surrounded by those kind of people, and those kind of people are in charge, and the world seems set up to let those people expose loopholes and let those people sort of run riot through our system, because our system doesn't seem to be kind of engineered to stop them. It seems to be engineered to allow them to do it, to reward them, and for everybody to look back and idolize them. And, you know, we revere success like that. And I enjoy watching people become successful. I really love films about ambition. And so, like, I always wanted to make a film about ambition. So these two sort of ideas came together. And then it seemed to me the interesting thing about this kind of guardianship grift is, like, there's a lot of women who take advantage of it, because women are often seen as sort of nurturing, you know, sort of the cliche that's in sort of culture is that women are sort of softer and nurturing and more trustworthy as teachers or nurses, or, you know what I mean? They're sort of, the thing that they're sort of kind of is put upon them to sort of make them seem sort of less impressive. I thought like that it was really interesting. These not horrifying, but interesting. These people were weaponizing that. And I thought, like, having a character who's really ambitious to weaponize that sort of cliche that's put on them just by their gender was really interesting. And so, you know, from there, I just started writing it. I was actually writing two things at the same time, and this one was the cheat. So the one that I was meant to be writing really didn't. It was another spec. I wrote both of these on spec. It was like I was really struggling with that one, and this one just sort of started. I kept on sort of like, it was always in the corner of my eye, and I was always wanting to write this one. And so I kind of gave up on the other one. I never wrote that one. And then I just wrote this one start to finish. And I don't write treatments or beat sheets. I sometimes write out like a like simple prose story, like a 2-page short story version of it, which I did on this one. And then I just start from the beginning. Though on this one, like some other ones, I wrote like 50 pages and then realized I'd got to page 1. So I threw away those 50 pages and then started on page 1. And those first 50 pages really informed like Marla, because that was all her backstory, basically. So I was like, I knew her backstory. because I wrote the story of how she had tried the American dream and failed, and been run over by the American dream, and then got very cynical about the American dream and saw it as sort of a rigged system, a rigged game. And so so then when I got to page 1, which was like page 51, the original draft, she was in a courtroom opposite this guy who was like coming to pieces. And so that I got there and I suddenly thought, oh no, this is the beginning of the movie. The rest of that is prologue, and I can get rid of that and I can start here. And some of the secondary characters are very different in that. I sort of modified it when I realized what it should be. But then from then on, I like writing without a plan, because it's sort of like driving without any brakes. It's exciting, but it kind of gets you there faster in a more interesting way sometimes,
Well, I mean, obviously so much of this film is about Marla, and it sounds like Marla was always at the heart of it for you. But when you're casting, what were you looking for in your on-screen Marla, and why did you know it had to be Rosamund?
Well, I was just looking to work with like extremely good actors who were really versatile, who could bring a fearlessness, because she isn't likable. She is in some ways she's human, and she needed to be human. She needed to be a human being and not played as a monster, but needed to not try to get the empathy of the audience. And I think a lot of people would be quite scared of that, like, to approach that. And, especially it's like an industry where you've got to monitor your own image a lot. And I think people are a bit scared of taking risks. And for some people, they would have seen it as a risky role. Whereas Rosamund immediately didn't. She really immediately engaged with it and really liked it. And was like, oh, Marty, I'd like to play her. So I mean, that makes Rosamund like automatically feel like she would be good for it, because she can see it and she wanted to do it. But I've just been, for Rosamund, I was just a fan of her work. I've seen many films, and I sort of collect actors I want to work with, like from people who are on top of the call sheets to people who are sort of day players, so I really love actors and love sort of like, finding actors and sort of like storing them up for like later use in my head. And Rosamund had been there for a good long while. And the great thing about Rosamund is like, I mean, I remember watching Barney's version and I knew Rosamund and all her work and not really realizing it was Rosamund until like the end of the movie. It's like, oh my God, that was Rosamund Pike. And then it was, and I love that, from Hostiles to Education to, Gone Girl, and then to this, like, it's just so different in every role. And somebody who can lose themselves in a role like that is really exciting, because you sort of don't know what you're going to get, but you know it's going to be good. And that's, when you've got this journey ahead of you. You don't want to sort of know exactly when you're going to get. You want to sort of find it, have it evolve, and have somebody who's sort of talented and brilliant and smart and can help you, mold this character and take ownership of it and make them iconic. And I just sort of knew that from her other roles and from talking to Rosamund, she would absolutely be able to do that. And I was right. She has. So it turned out brilliantly.
Well, Rosamund, when you get this script, what is it that makes you say, I want to play this? I know Marla. I think I can know Marla. What was it that grabbed you?
So funny, I've known Jay for a couple of years now, and I've never heard him tell that story about the first 50 pages. He knew I would have asked to read them. I think that's why he's never told me. And he'd have said, no, I haven't got them anymore, and I'd know that wasn't true. So no, I mean, when I read the script, I just wrote to Jay, cold, and said, whatever, I've got to tell the person who's written this that this is the most exciting, new screenplay that I've read in the last goodness knows how long. I just thought, this person has had a truly original idea. Other people are going to be envious of this idea when they come to read it or see it and wish they'd had it. And I just thought he'd done something so starkly original. He'd taken a female character, he'd made a sort of crime world with women at the center, which was sort of this technicolor, shiny, really appealing, seductive world, not the crime world that we're used to seeing. And he'd made a character who's having fun doing awful things. And we've seen that before in men. We've seen The Wolf of Wall Street and loved watching Leonardo DiCaprio, appall us and rivet us. And I got Marla's hustle. I just thought, this woman is so watchable because her plan is so awful, but it's so undeniably clever because the system is set up for her to win. She's not actually breaking the law. That's what's so... and she was just the other thing that really attracted me to Marla was her shamelessness. I think shame is a quality that haunts a lot of female characters, even if it's not sort of apparent and sort of on the front foot. And Marla is totally shameless and totally comfortable, not ill at ease, with who she is. I mean, Jay had flecked the script with sort of the idea that Marla might sometimes show seeds of doubt. And I always wondered, we never talked to it, I always wondered whether he'd put that in for potential producers not to be too shocked by her, and I just sort of always wondered whether we never really addressed it, did we? I don't know if you ever said, Rosamund, I need you to show a seed of doubt here. I don't think we did. And it's, she's certain, and she's not asking you to like her. And I think that's the relief of playing a character like this, is she never derails the movie by halfway through giving you a backstory that's supposed to make you bleed or hurt or feel for her. She's happy for you not to feel for her. She's happy for you to take her or leave her, but come on the ride if you want to. And for me, that I just thought this would be liberating. I want to do this. I'm going to have fun, and I think hopefully if we can get the balance right between making an unlikable person who's fun to watch, and I knew that was the challenge. That was the thing that worried me, is can we tread that line? And Jay and I talked a lot about that before, because I knew that you couldn't cross over. You couldn't make her so unlikable that you just want, I don't want to watch this.
Well, it's funny.
It was a dream. Roles like that don't come around very often. I feel very lucky to have got the chance to be Marla, honestly.
Well, I feel like so many people, and myself included, they see shades of Amy Dunn in her. And I think people love, in particular, seeing you do this sort of role. And there's something very special that you bring to it. Do you see those Gone Girl comparisons here? Isn't
the comparison me? Isn't it just that it's me?
It might be.
It might be just that, because I don't think Amy and Marla are similar, actually. I don't, sort of fundamentally, Amy is a planner, is a scheming planner who has to have all her, she's brilliant, but she needs to have a plan. Whereas Marla's a much more kind of scrappy woman who can think on her feet. I don't think Amy could have got out of the situation with the car. Amy is so indignant when she even gets robbed for, her dollars. She can't bear that someone's done that to her. Whereas Marla's kind of, Marla sees a threat and she sees opportunity. She's the person who, gets threatened and moves right in. And that's where I see the big departure between them. But where you do have similarity is that their plans, what they're doing, is kind of flawless. It's flawless in its ingenuity and cleverness. However much you despise it, they both execute very, very clever plans.
Well, it's also about the audience. I think how much fun.
Sure.
Like,
will play with you. They both play, and I'm very interested in female. They both, I suppose, weaponize. To take Jay's term, traditional notions of femininity. Amy is able to play vulnerable when she needs to. She's able to, convince America that she's the victim, and then you find out she's driving the story. And Marla is, as Jay said, able to wholeheartedly convince of honesty, integrity, someone who can be caring, commanding, kind, in court. She's effortless, and she enjoys that. She knows how to seem, and I think that's what's so unsettling for people. I think it's unsettling for me when you realize, it was unsettling for me right from being a kid, actually. The first films that really riveted me as a child was when I saw, maybe this is why I'm drawn to this. This is therapy, right in the middle of this session here. It's even in something like Agatha Christie, the sort of, when you find out that the doctor is the kind doctor who you're supposed, who you trust, is actually the killer. Those things always chilled me as a child, whenever I found out that somebody trustworthy could be lethal. And maybe that's sort of what still haunts me somehow, or fascinates me. There you go. You made me have thoughts.
Marc, you talked about, when we were talking about favorite scenes, the shift in the score. Can you talk more about how you and Jay figured this out? You guys have worked together before, obviously. It's something very different. What was he asking for, and what were you excited to be able to give him in the film?
Well, I think we're lucky because Jay and I both we've known each other since the disappearance of Atlas Creed when we first collaborated, and ever since we've been good friends, and so we have a kind of music geekery amongst us that we were endlessly talking about new music, or Jay's got a new idea, so I will inevitably go down the rabbit warren of going, you know, how about this sound, or what about this sound, and he'll fire some sounds over. So I feel like with Jay, I'm always having a musical discussion that's continuous, but I was lucky to get inroads into the concept of this film very early on, like before the script was even finalized, and we'd started discussing some ideas, and it's a way I'm not in this much detail with I Care a Lot, but it's a way I've always wanted to work, where the director kind of calls you up a year before the camera even starts rolling, and you start fleshing out conceptual ideas. And the obvious one coming from the script was the satirical take on the American dream. So I think the first sort of shift of work for me was, what does that kind of sound like coming out of the script? Like what kind of, how do we want to approach it? And there are so many ways to approach it, but I ended up writing a couple of pieces of, more than that, about 4 or 5 pieces, purely from reading the script, before I even knew how things were shot. But Jay had sent some artwork, just a photography that he liked. And I started to get an idea of the vividness of the colors that were going to go on in this film. And I just watched Doug's film, what's it called? The Call Center one.
Sorry to bother you.
Sorry to bother you, yeah, which I thought was brilliant. And I thought the cinematography for that was brilliant. And I can imagine Jay's mind and that mind colliding and seeing what would come out of it. And that formed, so the piece of music that sticks in my memory for in terms of sort of unpicking that tone was when Jennifer first gets taken to the care home, and that whole surreal world that starts to open up in the score, where the film, I mean, it couldn't have played out any better when I saw the rushes of like how it came across. And I know Jay toyed around with other ideas in that scene, but it was, you kind of came back to it by the end of it, and it was kind of unpicking that surreal quality, that sort of glossy sound, which I think made the difference for the first half of the film for us. Once we had found how that should sound, and then the outfits and the costume design just go perfectly with it as well. It sort of fell into place from that point. The darkness side of the score, I think that's more my comfort zone. I think Jay would agree that the sort of that when you go into those kind of textural assaults, and as the stakes rise, I found that a really comfortable place to exist in. The first act was almost kind of, how can I make this unappealing yet loads of fun, which kind of is what happens in the first half of the film, with Marla setting up the scenes as she does. So yeah, from the script was really revealing, but like I say, if I could have the choice, I would always start projects that early with directors. It makes such a difference to the formation of your ideas, because it's a really bold film, and I think the music tries to do quite a lot in this film. I think more than I've ever tried before in a film, in sort of dictating that path a little bit, thanks to great performance as well all around it, and great directing. But yeah, it was a real ride, that first half, and I think once we got that, I think we were really comfortable with how the tone was forming.
Well, Mark, I love that you mentioned the costumes, because I think I would be incredibly remiss if I didn't ask about Marla's look, which I think informs so much of what we immediately know about her. And so, Jay, I wondered, when you knew this is what Marla's going to look like, and then Rosamund, when you put on these very sharp suits and these very clean sneakers and this very precise bob, what that does for your performance.
Well, I always knew that I wanted a lot of colors and a lot of bright primary colors, like big blocks of them. And we talked a lot about certain photography, like Mark said, and reference films like Godard's films from the 60s, like Weekend and Pierre Le Fou, and almost like Almodovar as well, we talked about. And the way that those sort of really big, bold colors sort of have a real sort of effect on you. And you get to real sort of sense of, again, it's like, you know, her office is bright and airy and it's clean and it's, you know, it's got the nice green plants and she's wearing the red dress. And it almost feels a bit like a Doris Day comedy from the 60s or something, the way it looks. And that really kind of doesn't feel like a noir film. It doesn't feel like it should, you know, it feels like it's too much out in the open to be sort of people in smoky rooms making plans. It's like, it's just brazen, you know, and it's sort of even more disconcerting because they're not trying to hide anything away, and it's all very attractive. And the film's not telling you this is dangerous and dark. The film is telling you this is seductive and fun, which is always what I wanted to do. And then, so I knew I wanted all the clothes to have pops of color, especially Marlowe's. And so, you know, Rosamund and I watched a lot of films before we started shooting, just as Rosamund said, to find that line of sort of likability, unlikability, and also just to watch how other people have done ambition. And we watched a film where a character is wearing it's a film from the 90s. She's got a big boxy sort of trench coat through like the whole thing. Like it's almost like it almost looks like Darth Vader, like the silhouette. And we really like the way that like making Marla almost like a superhero would be good. So we very early on talked about getting a long trench coat. And so we had we talked to Deb about that, and Deb went and found that coat, which is great. You know, that kind of tan coat that Marla wears throughout, which is very different from like the thing that we were referencing, but kind of she made it all her own, and it had this sort of softness but strength to it at the same time. But then the very sort of, I mean, we went through lots of different we tried some different things, but I think there was one suit that we found, which is basically the same suit like 5 times in different colors, but it's like the cut that looks instantly sort of like, it's powerful, but it also can feel sort of like soft. It's a weird thing in different contexts. It looks like she's just well put together, and in other contexts, it looks like she's utterly threatening, and that was great. And then having that in these bright colors again, you know, it makes her feel both sort of disarming, because it's not like Tarantino film. She's not wearing a black suit with a black tie. You know, she's not trying to get sort of that sort of iconic thing, but she is iconic in her own way. So it really gave her a personality for me, as well as visually in the palette of the film. Just your eye just goes to her. She is the person in the room you look at, you know, and that was quite important. But you know, Rosamund, how did the clothes make you feel?
It's really nice to work with a director who is not frightened of color. You know, it's really fun to say more color, more block color. That's very cool, really. You know, I love wearing primary colors. It does, you know, color does give it has a very strong effect. And like, you know, to have your first day you're in a red dress, it feels good. It feels, you know, you feel like Marla has attitude and ownership of her space. And, you know, and Jay's right. We tried on that first suit, which is the suit in the office scene with Dean Erickson. It's a sort of teal blue with pencil legs, and it has a very nice shoulder, and they're slim cut suits. And we just thought, right, we've got to see this company's suits in every color. And they are all slightly different cuts. Some of them are double-breasted, and some of them are more lend themselves to being able to put the sneakers on and wear a t-shirt, you know, or she can wear a sort of silky top. And she accessorizes well too. You know, it's the coat. She rarely carries much. She's not really a bag person, Marla. She's like keys, phone, vape, go. And the sunglasses, you know, all those things were just sort of details. You know, she's not fussy, and I like that about her. Everything was clean. And then, you know, Jay made this very good call that sort of from that moment where Roman comes around in the hospital bed and Marla has become his legal guardian, you know, she's in this white dress, and it's very crisp, it's very starch. Obviously, you know, we know that it has the allusions, this like, you know, nod reference to a nurse, but from then on she's basically in black and white. And Jay always had this idea that, you know, that once you've made it, you no longer have to play your cards with color, you can go into black and white. So from then on we see Marla in suddenly a lot of monochrome, a lot of white suits and, you know, black suits, and in the sort of most of the montage sequence of her sort of rising success. And I love that. So it was a kind of dream wardrobe for me, because I love black and white, and then these pops of colour. What I don't really like so much is the sort of confusion of patterns. So it suited me down to the ground.
Well, let's look into our Zoom Q&A, and let's do a couple questions. Oh, this is a really good one. This is from Gabe. It's for Jay and Rosamund. Was there ever a moment you guys considered your own ethics when filming Marla's actions? She does some twisted and incredibly entertaining things in the film, but was it ever a bit much at times?
I mean, because I was always sure that she was doing terrible things, and we were showing her to be doing terrible things. And hopefully the takeaway from the film is like, you know what, don't exploit people for money. That's probably not a nice thing to do. I think we sort of like have that feeling of, even though there's like this kind of heist movie thing of like, it's sort of watchable, and there's, you know, and as Mark's music does, when they're sort of stripping her house apart, like it's exciting, but it's horrifying. And so your anger and your excitement are rising at the same time. So we always knew that, you know, the audience would end up hopefully feeling kind of like having mixed messages of queasiness, and weren't just taking it at face value that we were saying, hey, look at this is great. The sort of the feeling you get when you're watching it, you will get this horror of what they were doing, but actually in real life these people actually are a lot worse than Marla. You know, the way that they practice, you know, they're not quite as civil when they knock on the door, and they're not quite as nice, and they don't smile so much. They're a bit more abrupt and a bit like bailiffs. So, you know, we always knew that what we believed, you know, the audience should be walking out with. And so, you know, that's, I think, what Rosamund was saying about not trying to make the audience empathize too much. We had to make Marla human, because I don't think making her a monster is useful. I think you've got to realize that these people, like the Doctor and Agatha Christie, are the people who are all around us. We probably know somebody like Marla, you just don't know that she's doing these things, or he's doing these things. I think people are being terrible in the world, but then they're sort of quite nice to people who are their friends. And I think that was always, you know, what we clung on to as you were going through, that you had to be entertaining so people would pay attention, but you'd be clearly, you know, horrified at this. You know, for example, when Jennifer gets taken into the care home, she's, you know, we're in her point of view. We're not in Marla's point of view. Marla's sort of peripheral figure as she's been taken in. We're at her, in her experience of this horror, and the music is very much reflecting her experience. So it's not like we're excited because we got this lady. We're horrified that we're going through this experience with her. And so just sort of key decisions like that, I thought were like important to keep us on the right side of the line.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think we both were motivated. I mean, the first thing I did, as I said earlier, when I read the script, is go and see whether this happens. And we knew that we would start a conversation about this in making this film, but we wanted to start a bigger conversation by making something entertaining. And you're right. I mean, the stuff in the care home, that's why I've watched it with some people who laugh in this kind of choked way watching that sequence, because it's so awful. But the sort of surreal, sort of queasy, sort of sticky-fingered sort of farce of it is so kind of strangely comic, with the, you know, the greasy care home owner and the sort of melting chocolate in Jennifer Peterson's hand and all of that. I mean, it's so uncomfortable, but, you know, it's also close to the bone, which always makes us laugh, because it has accuracy. It has enough familiarity to be recognizable. So, you know, I've always sort of had a queasy feeling when exercising power in film. You know, when you have a character who has all these lines and is exerting tremendous power, it's quite a giddy feeling, not in a good way, in a queasy way. And you know, stalking in fury, when Marla's sort of furious and she feels like she's losing and she has got information that she doesn't have, and she walks into that, you know, recreation room at the care home where, you know, you've got a couple of elderly ladies playing violent video games, and, you know, Jennifer Peterson is shockingly drugged. I mean, really disturbingly drugged. And, you know, Rosamund thinks, oh my goodness, this is too much, you know. But me, Marla, is just like, you know, cut to the chase, woman. Tell me what I need to know. So, you know, thank goodness for Marla, because Rosamund would have caved. I can tell you that.
Let's see, I think we could probably have time for one more, but there's a really interesting one here from Yusuf, which I feel like we sort of talked about a bit early on with scripting, but I'd love to hear this. How did the film's concept evolve through the writing process? Was it always this crazy, or did it become more layered as it went on?
As I wrote it, it was, I sort of knew I wanted to kind of tell use the structure of a crime story, something that people are sort of familiar with the shape of, because people do watch crime stories like Goodfellas and they do empathize with his character, and he's doing terrible, terrible things, like violently awful things. And we sort of asked, and in The Godfather too, you're meant to sort of empathize and sort of go with their struggle. And they're on the other side, you know, they're on the wrong side of the law, you know, whereas like Marla is on the you know, not the right side of anything, but she's not breaking any laws. She's sort of like, she's overcharging. That's her sort of her only vice, really. But that the law could come down on her on. But you know, structuring it like that sort of crime narrative, like you've stolen something from the wrong people in your kind of meteoric rise to power, and using the opportunity that danger allows you. It's a very sort of gangster film. So for me, I was using sort of that shape of things, but then trying all the time to sort of not fall into sort of the things that people expect from them. So, you know, having the bad guys be sort of vain and useless and believing in their own hype better, more than they can actually do anything, like a lot of people in power, and, you know, a lot of men in power are like really believing in their own ability, but actually not being able to kind of organize piss up in a brewery. I mean, it's like, I thought that was kind of interesting, you know, against this woman who they're completely underestimating because they just see her as like, well, who's that sort of suburban Karen, you know what I mean? And what's she doing? How's she going to take us down? And I think that's not kind of, I think that stuff that was all kind of rich to me, that sort of, it didn't sort of change through the writing process, but it sort of like, it sort of evolved and sort of revealed itself more to me. And you can sort of, as you go through, as I was writing, I can sort of see like bits sort of popping up again and again and again, sort of like things that sort of had resonances from the beginning and the end, sort of mirroring each other, sort of sometimes happily, and sometimes you have an idea and go back and sort of layer it up. But it was mostly, I wanted it to kind of go a bit crazy because it's absurd. This idea, like Rosamund was saying, it's like you hear this true story and it's absurd. And so like taking that absurdity and pushing that absurdity to sort of say that this thing that's happening in real life, that's happening all around us right now, and not just with old people, but with all sorts of vulnerable people who are sort of have systems of kind of systems built up around them to exploit them for money or to sort of profit from them with power. I mean, that's all around us and it's horrible and it's absurd. And so that absurdity to me is like, you know, show the absurdity and show how absurd and how sort of ridiculous these people can be. And so, yeah, the craziness sort of came out of that.
Well, I think we're almost out of time, but I would like to end with a question for all of you, and maybe we can do Marc, Rosamund, and close out with Jay. Before we came on, the guys were sort of talking about the reactions that they've been getting this weekend when the film hit Netflix, and I feel like I couldn't go onto a social media account without seeing people talking about this and sharing GIFs and being excited about it. What has the response been like for you guys?
Who's first?
Go on, Marc.
I had to turn off all my notifications. But it's been amazing. It's really nice sort of having peers reach out to you, because much of the time, especially the last year, which has been weird for everyone, you know, I have been holed up in my studio an unhealthily large amount of time, and wondering if the outside world actually exists past my Cotswold doorstep. So actually getting all this lovely feedback coming through from people I knew but didn't know, who I like their work, just general fans of the movie, just saying, you know, well done for doing something really bold and brave with that, because it's a bold film, and my little bit of the sort of input in it really enhanced it. And you know, when we're working as hard as we were, Jay and I, in the studio, trying to nail tone, because tone in this film is such a specific thing to get right. It's if we'd have deviated just 5%, I think we could have fallen on our faces a bit. But when we've gambled a little bit with some ideas and just crossed our fingers that people wouldn't come back and sort of say, what on earth were you thinking? When people have come back and gone, I mean, like how they loved specific scenes, and how that delivered the right emotion, the right juxtaposition when it was needed to play against, you know, the fun element and the horrid element. It's just really rewarding to see people get it, because, you know, there were times when I was stuck in my studio, often with Jay going, what are we doing? but that's what happens, I think, when you're in a little microcosm of creative ideas flying around. You know, Jay and I love to experiment, and we had a lot of fun experimenting with this one, and it's just really, really nice to see people sort of understand what we were trying to achieve. And so that's been fantastic. That's been really nice.
Rosamund?
I second that. You know, it's been this weekend, I haven't felt like this for a long time. I haven't felt that energy of adults, grown-ups, wanting to watch a film on opening weekend since Gone Girl, actually. That was the last time I felt that about a film I was in, where there was this appetite that, you know, you weren't going to wait. You wanted to watch it and be part of the conversation. And that is, you know, that is why you do it. That is the thing that you chase, because that's the audience. You know, that's what means more than anything, I think, is you've delivered a flavor that the audience, or your audience and people who didn't know they were your audience, need. And that's thrilling. You know, and I think Marla is a risky character, and the delight I've experienced of seeing that people got her, and I've seen, like, people are very quick now to edit their own little bits of the movie, and I can see even from the little gifs or whatever that people are get her, you know, get what I was trying to do and trying to convey. And, you know, Jay was such an amazing filmmaker with, you know, who kind of had something in his head so clearly, and I think I caught it quickly and, you know, went with it. And then everybody who he brought on, you know, Mark and Doug Emmett and, you know, Laurie, who did our hair, and Deb, who did the costumes, and our production designer, everybody, you know, got it, and that's gone right through to Netflix, delivering it and doing a campaign for it, a sort of publicity, you know, the images. So often you make a film and then you see a poster and you're like, no, that's not the film I made. You know, and Netflix have delivered exactly what I had in my head, or what I think we all had in our head, of a look for this sort of Technicolor, strange, unfamiliar, challenging, fun, kind of glitzy but dark world. And it's it's been so strange, because we've all been isolated, and yet I felt it, and I'm not quite sure how I felt it. That's what I don't understand, is how I'm not a sort of all over the social media person, so I'm not quite sure how this fact has percolated through to my brain. That's for people who are more in tune with how these things work than me. But it's hit me. I realised. I'm aware. So it's exciting.
Okay.
Shall I say? Well, kind of the same as Rosamund. It's kind of I mean, one big nice thing is, like, a lot of people are talking about the issue at hand. So they come out of the film and they kind of like, that can't be real. That's not real. Who would make what a sick guy for making up this scam? And then they Google it and they're like, oh no, this is horrible. We should do something about it. So hopefully maybe that will turn into noise where people will actually do something about it, or they'll do something about themselves and their loved ones. But on a personal note, it's just the thing that I was sort of a little bit, you know, Netflix is great, but, you know, I love going to the cinema and watching movies in the cinema. And, you know, what we haven't had with this is to be able to watch it in a theater with people. But what was really weird about this weekend was that it kind of felt like we were, because people were sort of reacting to it in real time. You had this sort of crowd mentality of people reacting at the same time, and everybody sharing about it, all this word of mouth going past. So it almost felt like you were watching it in a movie theater. And, you know, and it's, what's been quite nice is that it felt like people needed to enjoy themselves, but also needed to be angry at the world at the same time right now. They sort of felt that those are two emotions they needed to express, and I think the film gave them the opportunity to do that, which is why I think people have really, you know, one of the reasons why it's sort of really resonated right now, as well as sort of like the content, I think is resonating because, you know, unfortunately older people have, you know, in the care homes have sort of have been in the news, and sort of care has been in the news in the past year for all of us. But on a personal note, just having so many people, just, I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot of people who really love the film and have contacted me. A lot of people who really didn't like the film contact me. But like Marc said, there's people who, they get it, but people are talking about it. People are watching it. And if people are outraged and hate it, they're feeling something. There's not a sense of just kind of like, meh, you know what I mean? It's like everybody's got an opinion. And even people who hate it are talking about it. So other people who might hate it are going to watch it. So it's like people are talking about it and people are watching it. And when you make something, you know, and as Marc says, you make it like in this little, you know, in this box. I wrote it in this room. He wrote the score in that room. And then, you know, we edited it in a tiny room. It's like, there's only like 4 or 5 people working on it. Apart from the shoot, there's like 4 or 5 people working on it at any one time. And I was working on it for like 2 years, and then it stops and you finish it and it goes out in the wild. And sometimes you can do that and it just sort of drifts away depending on the timing or whatever. But this one just really sort of seems to have struck a nerve, and because everybody's watching it, it's just, that's what you want. You want people to see your work, and you want people to talk about it afterwards and think about it afterwards. And it's hopefully this kind of film that people do think about and talk about afterwards, because I think there's a lot there to talk about.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining me, and congratulations. I saw the film at Toronto last year, and I'm so happy to be able to talk to people about it. My mom texted me right away. She's like, I love this. So it is out there and people are into it, and I think it's fantastic. So thank you, and thank you to everyone in the audience and people who asked questions. It was great. And that's a wrap.
We didn't get to answer all
Thank
of
you.
them, but it's been lovely to see so many hands raised, or whatever you do. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kate.
Cheers, thank you.
Bye-bye.